This is BBC Television from London. Normal programming has been suspended, and we now join Martin Lewis in the news studio.
Whatever happens in Central Europe this summer...
This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
Welcome to the second video on what happens to you, me, in the event of a war. You might find this hard to believe, but it's way worse than you might be thinking it's going to be. BBC released Threads in 1984, 38 years ago. I watched it live. It scared the heck out of me. It's about the run-up to, the actuality of a nuclear war, and then the aftermath. The immediate aftermath, and then a decade later, effects of nuclear war. It's very sobering, very frightening. It is available online, and you should watch it. Well, why did they do that? Because in 1984, it looked like both sides of the Cold War were going to make it a hot war. However, a bunch of American and then Soviet scientists actually got together and they figured out what it would be like if we did actually have a nuclear war. Their research put a halt to expansion of arms and an expansion of ideology to fight. Nuclear war from 84 onwards became off the table. But the film Threads did generate some discussion in the United Kingdom, whether we should be hitting population centres or military targets, what it would be like, and how we can avoid it, and if we needed to avoid it or if we needed to alter military strategy. That is lacking in 2022.
Escalation has a lot to do with the political situation. It is not just a technicality. Therefore, I don't really like this idea of theorizing about how it might be possible to throw around a few here and there.
Do you think that this sort of strategic this escalation is actually manageable, or is it something which is made more inconceivable by the prospect of nuclear winter?
I doubt it's manageable. It seems to me that the most likely way in which you cross the nuclear threshold is by using battlefield nuclear weapons. There is a conventional attack, it can't be held conventionally, and commanders are therefore tempted to use nuclear artillery, for example. Once you cross that threshold, I think you're into a totally unknown area. You simply do not know what is going to happen after that.
Why? What's the difference between 2022 and 1984? Our current leaders don't really remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the horror that people felt. And the rest is history. Well, is it history? Well, the Soviet Union appears to be back. To make matters worse, above-ground nuclear testing, which was a terrible, terrible thing to do, actually ended in 1980. So once a week, or even more frequently, visions of nuclear fireballs on TV ended. The Cold War ended in 1991. There's at least one European leader right now alive who was 5 in 1991. The people who are aware of what's going on if we have a nuclear war have died or aged out of positions of power. And new people have come along who just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to understand how dangerous this is. And they're not alone in that delusional madness.
A third of Americans favor U.S. military action in Ukraine even if it risks a nuclear confrontation with Russia. 35% of Americans supported the U.S. taking military action even if it risks a nuclear conflict with Russia, while 62% were opposed to the idea.
So 35% of Americans are clinically insane. I think we knew that anyway. Just joking. It's probably a very similar number elsewhere. 35% of Americans think that it's worth fighting a nuclear war with Russia to free Ukraine from Russian invasion. 35%. Shall we blame President Trump for this?
U.S. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, says the U.S., Russia, and China all have to get rid of their nuclear weapons. We want to get rid of nuclear weapons.
As much as I can't stand the man, you can't actually blame him for this, nor can you blame the Republicans.
Similar numbers of Republicans and Democrats favored U.S. military action, with 36% of Republicans and 35% of Democrats supporting it.
So what do these 35% of insane people, who are equally spread amongst Democrats and Republicans, want to risk? In 2019, a simulation was run in Princeton University, showing what would happen in a nuclear war, starting conventionally, going battlefield, getting worse, going all out. They calculated using current and known force strengths what would happen. Usually I say, grab a coffee and a vegan snack. For this video, you might want to grab something stronger. During the 6 years of World War II, which went from 1939, not 1941, to 1945, approximately 3% of the human population of the planet died because of the war. That was 70 to 85 million people. There was less people then. So World War III would kill less people in terms of percentages than World War II. And in fact would kill less people overall. Only 34.1 million dead. In a couple of hours. World War II went on for 6 years. And there are other effects that are now going to kick in. I would be shocked if 3% of humanity remains alive a year after World War III. But that guess of mine might be too optimistic.
Circumstances of an increasing arms race has already led to the appearance of a number of global ecological problems. It is quite clear that in the event of a nuclear war, the effect on the biosphere will be magnified.
Predicts that the climate of the Earth could change dramatically after a nuclear war, with weeks or months of darkness and intense cold.
For biological systems,
the drop in temperature being discussed would be great enough to cause the extinction of thousands of species and to destroy food crops over much of the planet. Results that cast doubt on the credibility of current nuclear strategy.
In a so-called limited nuclear war. This again stresses that in a nuclear war there can be no victor and no vanquished. In the final analysis, all sides suffer fatally. Thus we are raising the very question of life on Earth.
Some of you are going to say, nuclear winter! I hope all of you actually are thinking about that right now. Some of you, however, will be thinking, nuclear winter, that was debunked. It's not going to be like that. Bad news for you, nuclear winter is not debunked and will happen in this type of war and will kill us all. So for decades the strategy was using tactical nukes, and commanders and politicians to a large degree considered one weapon, one explosion. In fact, testing and all the rest of it was on one explosion. Nobody really thought about multiple explosions, what a strategic strike would do. Because they honestly believed nobody would ever use them, no matter what. This is kind of a strategy you could call save Europe by killing Europe.
The standard nuclear warfare textbook, published by the American Department of Defense.
Bit of a break from the video, but American Command actually handed out computers to their frontline soldiers to actually figure out yields and how to calculate what's going to happen when they fire their weaponry. Using tactical nuclear weapons was a given until 1984. America definitely was going to do it, and Russia probably was going to do it as well.
Comes complete with a handy plastic computer. You can dial the warhead yield to give the optimum outcome. Many tests of fireball and blast wave from small single warheads were carried out on military equipment in Nevada and the Soviet Union.
Well, if you're just testing one weapon in a desert or a coral island, yeah, why would you think about biosphere? Why would you think about what's going to happen to the planet if you, say, fire 1,000 tactical weaponry at the same time? What thoughts, what tests they actually did on the bigger picture showed clearly that the use of nuclear weapons was insane. And given how much of the command structure was devoted to tactical nukes, how much money was being made from them on both sides, that sort of research didn't really get into the command structure, into the political sphere.
Here at Brookhaven, New York, a forest was subjected to gamma rays, similar to those that occur with a nuclear explosion. The radiation from a small source on a tower destroyed all vegetation at the center. Further away, as it became less intense, the more resistant plants could survive. The hardiest plants were grass and sedges, and some species of lichens. It was also discovered some populations of insect pests increased. Pine trees were killed more easily than oak, but the steady radiation used here was very different from the beta and gamma doses that come from fallout.
When you have beta and gamma radiation together, the biological effects are actually amplified. But on top of all this, they uncovered nuclear winter. They did not know that there would be one.
A fifth of the explosive power was assumed to hit military and industrial targets in cities. Half of these impacts cause significant fires. 5% become firestorms, which lift the smoke high into the stratosphere. Forest fires burn an area the size of Scandinavia, raging for over 10 days. Fires at oil wells and refineries contribute 7% of the smoke and last 30 days. The TAPS computer program assumes that the smoke and dust are spread evenly worldwide and then cuts a slice through the atmosphere.
That's an error. The burning in the northern hemisphere is going to be way, way, way worse than the burning in the southern hemisphere. Cloud blocking the sunlight effects will be much more pronounced in the northern hemisphere. However, their computer technology wasn't the greatest back then, so they couldn't really fine-tune stuff like that.
The result is that 25% of the sun's energy is scattered back to space by the dust in the stratosphere. Of the remaining rays, most are absorbed by the soot. This heats the upper troposphere. Only 1% gets through to ground level, causing twilight at noon, a far more severe effect than anybody had expected.
They had their war kick off in July. July in the northern hemisphere is the middle of summer, so you get maximum sunlight falling. They lost all of the sunlight, 99% of it. 1% had reached the ground for days to weeks to months. Think about that. If the war happened in January, pretty much there ain't no sunlight hitting the planet. But Huples, smoke and dust clouds don't stay in the atmosphere that long. Sure, it might get cold for a few days or a week or two, but then it'll get fine. No.
The results are shown as a graph of temperature against time in days. The horizontal line is freezing point. A few days after the war, the temperature drops rapidly to 23 degrees centigrade below zero. It then recovers over the next 6 months. This graph implied the end of the natural world as we know it.
This would be the end of the natural world as we know it. We have spent trillions and trillions to do this. What was the enemy's version of this?
The main consequence of the nuclear conflict will be very sharp temperature drop. Can take place in some days, 2, 3, 5 days. And this temperature drop will be very big. We are talking about 20, 40, or 50 degrees centigrade temperature decrease over the territory of the United States, Europe, Soviet Union. And this temperature drop will continue during many months, say 6 months or more. It depends on scenario.
20 to 60 centigrade drop of temperature, or 68 to 140 Fahrenheit if you're a Yankee, over a few days. Think about that. Now, the Russians did have better computers back in 1983.
Dr. Alexandrov's model used the same war scenario, but was able to compute the results in the form of a map. After 40 days, the contours show the drop in temperature. Northern Europe, minus 50 degrees centigrade. Siberia, minus 40 to minus 56 degrees centigrade. Canada, minus 30 to minus 40 degrees.
So the Russian models absolutely confirmed the American model. Temperature of the planet would drop 70 Fahrenheit to 140 Fahrenheit over 6 months or longer. However, I'll interject a word of caution about models.
The behavior of the atmosphere of the Earth is notoriously complex and unpredictable. In 1983, for example, an ocean current change called El Niño caused global weather variations. But the two computer models were predicting changes in overall climate, which is much more stable.
So now we knew in 1983 that a nuclear war will smash the climate, plunge the planet into darkness, and cause a deep freeze unlike anything we've ever seen in humanity's long existence on the planet. This is a dinosaur erasing event, and we're doing it to ourselves. There's no new food, there's no running water because it's all ice or radioactive or both. There's no electricity, there's certainly no solar electricity, and most wind power will be destroyed by winds that are going to be incredibly strong, specifically in the oceans and the seacoast areas. Going to be no trade, it's going to be severe radiation, and air quality is going to be pretty bad.
It's no longer realistic to assume that you can merely go into your basement for a couple of weeks to avoid the worst of local fallout and then come out and resume life as it had been before the nuclear war.
This is sobering. Risking nuclear war on this scale, no matter who's doing it or for why, is a terminal event for our species. Next time, we're going to look at why they got it wrong. Temperature drop's only going to be half as bad as they think it is. That's still enough to extinguish life on Earth for us. We're also going to simulate India and Pakistan going at each other's throats using much more modern technology in 2009. We're going to talk in detail about what happens to all the coasts of the entire planet in the event of this type of nuclear war. We're going to talk about why the smoke and dust in the atmosphere isn't going to come down and what that means in terms of water. The crops are going to die, the oceans are going to die. Because I was born there, what happens to the British climate? Could it possibly get any worse than it already is? Until then, thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, as does Wolfie. Stay calm, stay safe, and hope peace breaks out soon. Doodles! Doodles! That's it, Wolf. This has been a Wolfie Has a Stick production 2022.